25, so I thought, and how many of us were in the service at one point in time? Some of us, Carolyn. But that's good for the guys that haven't. Over the years, when I was a kid, my dad had a passion for just bench rush shooting. The cheapest rifle he could get, because in the 1950s a lot of guys didn't have any money, so he'd buy the Springfields and all the military rifles. And being a machinist, he'd gunsmith them and shoot them and make a mag rack. Over the years, he collected a few rifles and he kept them issued or tweaked them just a little bit. And I collected a couple, and then when he passed away, I got his collection. So what I thought, because we're all around in the 1950s, we remember World War II, we weren't there, but we remember Korea, we were in Vietnam, we're around Vietnam, and we know about the Gulf Wars. So this is a little history from about just after 1900, or just a hair prior to 1900, through today. I'm just going to take a few minutes and go over a little bit of the evolution of assault rifle. Back in the late 1800s, England built a rifle that still used black powder. Everybody was using black powder before smokeless powder came about. And like our 30-30 and 34 Craig, all those cartridges were named out of the caliber and the amount of black powder they used. In England, they developed the 303 British cartridge under black powder. Well, with the evolution of smokeless powder, they just were able to change the powder to whatever fit that cartridge, but they kept the cartridge. That was in like 1889, 1880s. Well, about that time, they produced a rifle called a SMLE Enfield. Similar to this, it was a number one, and they changed a bit, and then they made the number 4 Mark whatever's in it. And this is a number 4 Mark II. It's actually made in the early 50s. So the Brits made this rifle from the late 1800s to about 1955. Same cartridge, same action. It was quite advanced for its day because it would hold 10 rounds. It has a box magazine, but unlike modern rifles, the magazine was made to stay in the rifle. Their factories made 10-round stripper clips where they would put the stripper clip in here and just push 10 rounds down. Unlike today where you drop your clip, you put a new clip in and go. In 1912 and 13, they wanted a different rifle. They wanted to advance this one. So somebody in England developed a rifle design called the P14 Enfield. The British manufacturers weren't quite ready to retool, but they talked the U.S. into retooling some of the factories, like Remington and that, into making the P14 rifles, mid-1914-15. Unfortunately, World War I broke out. They made almost no 303 British P14s, which look basically just like this rifle. But since Winchester, Remington, and Eddystone had already changed all their machining to make the P14 Enfield, they said, and they know the war was coming for them too, they said, well, let's just take the 3006 cartridge. All you have to do is change the length of the action a little bit, and that's where the 1917 Enfield developed. It was because of the Brits developing it, and so they made them as we got into World War I. They made millions of these. There were actually more Enfields in World War I than there were Springfields. So that's how this developed. It was kind of by accident and by the development or the start of World War I. This was discontinued, I think, in the 1920s. So it was very short-lived in its manufacturing. But it's a great rifle, great heavy action. Could hold 6 rounds, although the U.S. always used 5-round clips. So again, a little stripper clip. Set it in here, you just push your 5 rounds. Big heavy rifle, 26-inch barrel, very accurate. They're a wonderful action for the guys that sporterize military. I have one of these sporterized, and it's just a beautiful rifle. This particular rifle was made in, I think, what I say, January or March of 1918. The military stamps their barrels, and as long as, June of 18. As long as, and this rifle's complete the way it was. It's not been rebarreled. So this was made in 1918. This one's 1918, everything's 1918. Or prior, the U.S. had the 30-40 Craig. It was, I believe, their first bolt-action rifle. I don't have a 30-40 Craig. And I don't know if I have an interest in getting one, but they're around. You can still get them. They wanted a better cartridge, a stronger cartridge. So they developed Springfield, and I'm not sure who actually developed the cartridge, but they developed a cartridge called 1903 cartridge, and the rifle, the Springfield 1903. Well, that cartridge didn't work real well. And I can't remember if it was a written cartridge or something about it wasn't right. So it took them 3 years to develop or change that cartridge to make it the 30-06 that we all know today. But yet, since this rifle was developed in 1903, that's why it's called the 03 Springfield. And they were used all the way through the Second World War. They were used in Vietnam. They put scopes on them for sniper rifles. Great rifles, not too heavy, 24-inch barrels. Early in World War II, or mid-30s, they wanted to update this because the rear sights on them were open sights fine. So what they did is they just changed the housing on the receiver and put a peep sight on it. And they called that the 1903-83. Manufacturing was starting to progress, so they were making stamped products instead of machine products. All these older rifles, all the parts are machining, time-consuming, expensive. Once they started stamping products, and the 03-83 is one of the first rifles that, like the four-plate trigger guard, that's all stamped steel, stamped, parkerized, put together. So that's the only difference between the 03 and the 03-83. Now, when they first made these through Springfield Armory, they made about 800,000 of them, and they mis-heat treated their receivers. So if you ever find or have a collection or see one that's got a low serial number from, they'll say right on here, Springfield Armory, they're brittle. Their receivers are brittle. They're really not supposed to be shot. This rifle is a low serial number, but it's made in Rock Island, from the Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. They had trouble, but they caught that problem with only a couple 100,000 made, and this one's like 325. So this rifle was made in the 30s. So this one's got a good receiver. War I on the U.S. side and the British side. Back in 1889, somewhere in that era, the Germans developed the 98 Mauser. It was a type of action that actually Springfield followed. Enfield's a completely different action, but Springfield followed this 1917 followed. It's called a double lug lockup, which almost all bolt actions have been up until Browning, and some of the other ones went to 3 lugs to turn it 60 degrees instead of 90 degrees. But the Germans made millions of these 98 rifles in different forms. Some straight bolts, some turn bolts, some this length. They made some about this length. This one, and they were made all over Europe. This one happened to be made in the late 30s, mid-30s in Czechoslovakia, in the brutal arsenal in Czechoslovakia. Somehow it survived the war. Don't know where it went or where it was, because the barrel is just like a mirror. All the steel in it's good. It's all original. It's all the same parts. I think the bolt number is different than the receiver, so somewhere along the line the bolt might have got changed. But it shoots real well. And like the U.S., Germans ran a 5-round stripper gun. This is what they call a 7.92 by 57 Mauser, 8 mm Mauser. It's their standard cartridge they use for all the way through World War II. Some of the countries made a rifle basically identical, but they calibered it in 7 mm. So there's a 7 by 57 and 8 by 57. Germany stayed with the 8 by 57. And I've never heard why they made that other caliber. I have no idea why. But basically they're the same rifles. This one had, and most of these old ones too, when you look at it, they used really nice wood compared to by today's standards. Nice walnut, good finish. Again, the guys in the factories were machinists and artisans to make products they were proud of. Then on the other side of the world, 1800s, and they made a rifle with their own cartridge. It's a 6.5 millimeter by about 50, I think it is. So it's a little short cartridge. And they made this rifle called an Arisaka Type 38. Why they made Type 38, I don't know. It's probably as they progressed in designs, they had Type 1, Type 2, Type 3, whatever. For some reason, the Japanese like really long barrels. And they have, like the Germans, the cleaning rods that were built right into it. As part of it. This was used in World War I era, World War II era. Between the First and Second World War, well, I should say World War I when the Japanese were in, but between after First World War and Second World War, Japan had contracted with Greece to make a lot of their armament. So there was thousands of these rifles, or hundreds of thousands of these rifles, made in Greece and then just shipped over to Japan. As the war went on, they got hurting real bad, real fast, so they achieved them. I mean, this was one of their better condition rifles. They always used a basic wood, didn't worry much about polishing it. They used excellent steel. These receivers are tough and strong receivers. Eventually, they started by making knurled on their safety. They have an interest in safety, which I'll show you. But they never polished them up much, the rifles, but they're solid. When it's locked and ready to go, this whole butt end turns about 20 degrees and locks. That's your safety. Won't go anywhere. Later in the war, as they had to make them, they quit putting the knurl on here because at the same time they started stamping their bottoms. They got cruder and cruder, used tougher wood. They quit putting steel on their butt plates. So late World War II rifles were really quite basic products. A lot of these that came over, and I'm not sure why, maybe somebody knows why, but when the U.S. brought some back, or however they got back, they were ground their rising sun off, or whatever this is called, their blossom.
Chrysanthemum.
The what? Chrysanthemum. This rifle, no idea how it got here, still has it. Nothing was ground up in this particular rifle.
I read the book where they called them red assholes. The guys that were fighting them.
Pardon?
The guys that were fighting against the Japanese,
sure.
They called it the red assholes.
Sure, yeah. But very dependable. This barrel, if you never look down and I'll take the bullet and you pass it around. Doesn't look like much. I mean, it looks real pitted and dirty. And my dad, in his fun, found a load in a bullet that shoots one. These came with 160 grain. That's what the military shot, 160 grain round loads. Real thin, real long. I've shot a military bullet through here, and it hardly hits the paper at 100 yards. It's just all over. He developed the load using a 145 grain bullet with 30 grains of 30, 31, whatever. And I shot this rifle when I was in Florida, 100 yards off a bench, 5 shots, inch and a half. And you would say, going through looking at that barrel, you'd say you could never do it. Well, I didn't believe it until I did it. But very simple. Working with, I'm not sure, I think it's Springfield Armory. In the mid-1930s, developed, let's call it 276 Peterson, semi-automatic rifle. Very similar to the M1 Garand. The U.S. said, we ain't changing cartridges, we ain't changing calibers, so you gotta make this. And that was a 10-round semi-automatic. The U.S. says, we're not changing. So he adopted the receiver, the new concept of the receiver, to the 3006. Because their cartridges are larger, it can only hold 8 rounds. It but everybody knows about the 8-round and block. I didn't bring it in. Block clips, but the clips, they slide in, last shot, they pop up. This was developed in 37. And really, the Army, I think, accepted it in 37, somewhere around there. But they didn't get tooling up for it. So a lot of the troops in 1942, early 43 were still using the bolts, and they were fed in as the war went on. Excellent rifle. Just, I love to shoot this rifle. They were quit being made about 54. They made almost 6 million of them. The civilian marksman program down in Alabama and Ohio can sell these. And they're able to be sold on the open market too. This one I bought through the CMP. I did all the paperwork, sent in my DD-214, my exit from the service, and the fact that I'm an NRA member and I shoot the club and all that. So you qualify and you can buy product from them. And you can buy real rough M1s. You can buy ones that are in a little bit better condition, ones that are in pretty good condition. And yet some of the people down in the armory down there, they're taking parts because they have hundreds of thousands of parts, but not necessarily complete rifles. So they take the receivers, make sure they're good, they'll clean them, reparterize them, and there's a company, and I can't remember the name, they make new barrels to match their military issue style barrels. And this is one of them. It's called a special, CMP special. So what it is, it's either new or completely reconditioned parts, all reparkerized, so it looks good, put together with a brand new walnut stock. So I got this about 3 years ago as a brand new rifle. Yet the manufacturer date on it through the serial number says about 1954 is when the receiver's made. Nobody knows when the other parts were. But they do everything. They put the barrel on, they put the bolt in, they headspace it so it's shootable. This particular rifle shoots about 2.5 to 3 inches out with the open sights. When the military was making these, they said they should be able to pull any M1 off the line, take it out, clean it. It should shoot a 4-inch group at 100 yards. That was their specs. They wanted rifles coming off the line to shoot. And I suppose if they found one or two that didn't, then they'd have to go back and see why the manufacturing procedure, barrel pressure, whatever. Port's too small, all kinds of little things could go on. They have windage and elevation on their rear sight. The Enfield in the World War I had elevation because of the flip-up knob, had no windage. You had to knock your front sight over left and right for the windage. Springfields had elevations. Even these older Enfields also had a flip-up sight with a small peak too. Had elevation, no windage. Your windage again, you had to get to know your rifle, or you had to tap your front sight over. Any questions as we go? I mean, I'm talking to anything I know. I used the Thompson machine gun and militarized it in the 45 ACP. But it was a tough product to manufacture. It was very detailed, very mechanical. It worked. Go ahead, Dan.
Really had
my
dad
dad
took one up off
Thompson?
Well, you had to keep that yourself.
Sure. They had a high rate of fire. But anyway, on the other side, let's go back to 1910. And I don't know what the military used before 1910 because I haven't read up on it. You know, the good revolvers came out with the Cowboys, the single-action revolvers. Later, Smith & Wesson, some other companies developed double-action revolvers. And so the revolver industry developed, and somewhere along the line, the semi-automatic pistol industry developed. Well, the military in 1911, or somewhere shortly after 1911, took John Browning's patent of the 1911 pistol and said, this is going to be our handgun. It shoots a 230 grain bullet, about 850 feet a second. Excellent sidearm for combat. A lot of punch, out to about 30 yards. Very nice. This happens to be a brand new one that I bought in December. But Functionally, it's identical to the ones made back in 1911. But
It looks smaller to me.
it might look smaller, it's the same. It's got a 5-inch barrel, you know, and it might be a little more refined, but the ones I shot when I was in the National Guard were not much different than this. 7-shot straight clip magazine. What I find interesting about these, and as we get into some of the newer ones, is how they were made on one side to be safe, and how they were made to be simply taken apart. Now this, way back then, this pistol's cocked. There's a safety here, can't be fired. That safety can come off. You can't be fired. There's a safety as part of your grip. This has to be pushed in. This, as long as this is pushed in, it can be fired. What I find interesting about taking them apart is you don't need any tools. You push this detent in, this front caliber spins around, this comes out, this comes out, spring pressure is gone. You open the slide a little bit, pull the spin out, most of them apart.
Murphy's Law.
Yeah, Murphy's Law.
Got cold through.
No. I gotta find out why you don't more. This should slide right off. That's all there's to it. And this was developed in 1920. 100 and some years ago. Excellent. So moving on to the newer stuff. Bayonets. In the old days, for some reason, they thought, because of maybe watching a lot of old-time movies, that they needed long bayonets. This is a Japanese bayonet. This is a World War I Springfield bayonet. By the time I got into service, and even by the time Korea came around, they had shortened these to about 14 inches. They didn't need all this extra steel. This particular one will fit the Springfield and the M1 Garand. This one fits the Aerosoc. Once we got to the Garand in the early 1950s, they said, we need to modernize it, we need to update it somewhere. So they took the same bolt assembly and they said, we can use something that's a little smaller, a little lighter. 308 cartridge was around. Whether it was developed and then came around as commercial, or it was commercial and developed by the military, I don't know. But then they developed the M14. Basically the same action, same type of slide, but they straightened that bent thing out inside here. The gas port's right here. Went to a 22-inch barrel, put a muzzle brake on it, muzzle flash hider, supposed not a brake. Went to a shorter cartridge, the 308 versus 306, a little lighter. The rifle really isn't much lighter, but I have a small clip in here. The standard military clip, I think, was a 20-round clip, or you could get a 30-round, and those were magazines. You could have pouches of magazines, so you drop the magazine, put it going in. Same sight settings. Basically, the M1 sights and these are interchangeable. This one, when I was in the service, ours were semi-automatic. On, not sure which side it was, on one of the sides, for the military ones, some of the military ones, they had a selector, semi-automatic to full automatic. When I was in OCS down at Fort Benning, we did get to shoot some fully automatic. What they did is, as they produced them, they thought they needed a guard on them, so they put this double flip on here, this double butt plate. They thought when you were shooting them fully automatic, this would go up to hold it down on your shoulder. You would expand your sling out. You normally shot them prone, and they had a bipod, just a little simple clip bipod. You see fellows at archery shoots have these little clips, they put them on the bottom of them, and all they set down is almost identical to that. They clicked on here, and you had your bipod. So you'd go down and you put your hand down like this, and you pull down on it. And when you fire it, it'll jump like it. It wasn't really a very good small-handed rifle. Too much rise to it. They were set up with one screw hole, and they made a mount where they could be mounted with a scope. So this worked early in Vietnam, and then of course they went to the AR-15s, or the M16s. So it was too late for Korea. 57 through mid-60s they were used. They still are used, this action's still used today. They're using them as sniper rifles because they found that they can put really good barrels on them, really good scopes, and they will outshoot the AR or the M16 because they'll outshoot at a 500 to 700 meter range real well. So they're using this yet today in some minor fashion. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe the lighting, they went to the stock.
Oh, right, yeah, even today you get all kinds of different stocks. I went with traditional stock because I wanted it traditional. Again, these are being made civilian through Springfield Armory in Illinois, which is different than the old Springfield Armory out east. Nice shooting guns. They don't kick quite near what the 306 kicks. They're nice shooting. But they have kind of a short service life for the military. There's so much talk about this platform. Everybody says we got to get rid of the assault rifle, AR. Well, AR stands for Armalite. That's the company that first manufactured when they made the systems. This was designed in the mid-1950s. Late 57, 58. This concept was designed by a guy named Stoner for Armalite. Different concept from all of these because it's semi-automatic. They were made to be fully automatic. But the fact that it's gas-fired semi-automatic, similar to the M1 Garand in one fashion, is that there's a hole in the barrel. The original M16s had a 20-inch barrel. This is 16. Same type of flash hider. Had a longer forearm on them, but from here back they're the same. Well, not the same. They had a single buttstock. Quite a while ago they went to this multiple buttstock on getting, but you can see the single ones. The center platform, the working part of this rifle, has been the same since early 1960. So they're a 50-year-old item. They're not new. What I like about them is they're simple, like simpler than all new ones. They shoot a 223 or 5.56 nail, 62 grain bullet. They started with a 55 grain bullet, and then the Army said after a while, we want something a little heavier, so they went to a 62 grain bullet. And the weakness they had, and everybody knows about the problems they had with the original ones in Vietnam. They had two problems. They had three problems. One, they didn't finish all of the aluminum on parts of them, the ones that were going overseas, and they corroded. They went from a 55 grain bullet and one type of powder to a 62 grain bullet and a different kind of powder with different pressures. They would jam because their cycle of fire was too fast and they were fired fully automatic. The other thing is, when they first made them, they made them with chrome lined barrels. When they manufactured them for military, they didn't chrome line the barrels. The barrels were pit, rust, whatever. They were getting so many cases hanging up in the chamber because it wasn't chrome lined, and that's where the Army, the troops got in trouble. They'd shoot a few rounds, the case would hang up. They'd have to take the rifle apart, get that cartridge out of there. By then they were gone. Once those issues were solved, and it took them about a year, 2 years to get that solved, this then became an excellent platform. Some years later, they took this platform and made it a little bit larger, so now they have what's called the AR-10, which has all variants of the 308 cartridge. You can shoot 243s, 308s, all numbers, because the 308 and the 223 magazine system won't match. So they're different platforms. They look alike, but they're physically a little different. What's interesting about this rifle Again, it runs 20 or 30 round magazines. Falls out, may to be replaced. Is to take it apart, you push this pin, a pin comes out, rifle comes apart. The spring for the return is in your buttstock, it's right here. In the 60s, when we were to service these, were called the Mattel toys. Because you went from this big, beautiful rifle to this piece of plastic. And of course, when you shot it, all you heard was this spring in here. You heard the gun go up, you heard the spring, so it was... So they were called Mattel toys. That's how it came, because of the plastic. But with this system that was designed, again, back in the 1950s, the recoil returns here. When you take this out, the bolt falls out, that can be taken apart. This is just a charging handle which pulls it back. This has a little port right on top. This whole unit and this system doesn't have that long rail to run the action. The gas itself runs through a little tube, and the end of the tube is right up here. So when that gas pressure hits this, there's enough pressure to pop it back and forward. Simpler design, less moving parts. So people can talk what they want about the AR system. It's a very viable, proven system. And in the civilian version, this rifle is no different than this rifle, other than looks. They both shoot one shot per trigger pull. So the tube never changes. So like when my wife shoots this, and these have almost no recoil. I mean, a little bit more than a 22. So when she shoots this, and she's short, she can come up and she can just shoot it like this, and or whatever position she wants. Or if you put a scope on it, you can put it at the position you want. So rather than moving the scope to your exact point, you can move the buttstock to your exact point. Sure.
Another part of it is, hold up, like 14, for example.
Okay.
You're talking about the jumping, which isn't just straight. When you shoot this, you've got this angle.
Oh, everything's below the barrel, so it comes up.
But the AR-15, 16 is straight. You don't have that. So
It's got a straight, more of a straight rearward recoil rather than a upward movement. Sure. All of these will, I mean, the 223 round and the 5.56 nail round, I mean, they in competition, these fellows are shooting these at 600 yards extremely accurate. That's about their limit because of the light loading. A lot of people in 600,000 yard, like inch barrel longer thing, they advanced them. They had a selector on a safety, to be safe, fire, auto, pulley. And you could run up all 20 rounds. They found that that wasn't working for the troops. So somehow in their trigger mechanism, they set it up so it could fire 3 shots. So it'd be safe, fire, or select, which would be a 3-round burst. So when they pull the trigger, boop, 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 that's all it would shoot. Maybe more accurate, save ammunition, whatever. They still do run some of these in fully automatic for special units, but otherwise it's a 3-round burst. Civilian version, of course, is always semi-automatic. This platform is used today in this style for the most part. A 16-inch barrel. Some of the special forces are using 12-inch barrels because they're light and handy. Class with stocks on them. The original setup had this on and it was all machined in. This particular model has a flat top on it, like you would have for mounting scopes, the dovetail, and this unscrews here. And most of the units today don't run this rear sight. They might not even run the front sight. But what they do is they have like a red dot or some kind of, you'll see them a little short scope or a single lens scope, a halo sight, that they'll come up and it's lit with a battery so they can shoot through that. A little more accurate, quicker pickup because you don't have to line up the front rear sights. Yes?
The other thing I remember reading in these trains that I got a kick out of getting back to California, that part of the training the military changed. You no longer, if you're running and hear a few bursts, you throw that butt down and land on the butt. You couldn't do that with the Altoid, they were breaking the stocks off.
You'd break the stock. Plus, you can't bend it. I mean, if you bend it, the recoil springs in here, and then it wrecks the brake.
Does that stock have to be extended to shoot or does it?
No, you can see there's a hole here.
Oh.
So, but good target rifles normally are good for 3,000 to 4,000 shots, and then they start slowly getting worse. So, you know, you can shoot these rifles, 10,000, 15,000 shots straight away. That's plenty of them. It's not very hard.
Do you have any trouble finding powder?
No, all the handloading books use standard powders. There's 3 or 4 different powders.
Finding the availability of it.
For a while there was, when I buy powder now, when I pick it up, I try and pick it up in a depot. That gives you a lot of rounds. There's 7,000 grains in like a 3006. Roughly has 50 grains of powder. It could be 47 or 55, but roughly 50 grains. So that's 2 shots per 100 grains, and you got 7,000 grains in a pound. And I got 8 pounds of it. But it's good in multiple, the types of powder I use. I can use the same powder in, I can use 2 different powders in all the bolt action rifles, and then I use 1 other powder, which could be used in there, between these 2, and 1 different powder. So I only need 3.
What do you use in the 223? You tried that market yet?
I have marked it, I don't like it. I mean, it's fine. There's different kinds of powder. There's extruded powder that looks like little Billy cylinders. There's ball powder, which is like micro balls or flecks. Like crystal powder is a fleck type powder. You know, when I handle it, I do everything 1 step at a time. Extruded powder, if you run it through your thrower, is less accurate. You might have almost a quarter grain and a half grain difference. Ball powder is pretty much dead on because it's almost like real fine sand. So it sets in the thrower and it's real accurate. It's probably within a tenth of a grain. In most of these things, I'm not worried about that much about accuracy. But like in the 223, I use ball powder. In the rest of these, I use extruded powder. When I'm trying to load bolts for accurate shooting, I'll throw a charge and then I'll put it on a scale and I trickle it in so I am exact on every cartridge. Well, maybe only go 20 of those. But if I'm going to shoot my M1 just to shoot with my family, then I just throw powder in. If you're half grain up, it's a mild enough load. If you're half grain one way or another, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like shooting 2018 and 2016 on a compound, 20 yards, you're not going to lose. There's no flat pulse. So that's all. Yeah, come up, look ahead or whatever.
Jim, I think all of us want to say thank you for bringing your guns here. I think what makes our little Wednesday morning league or shooting nice, which is different than most clubs, and as well as George that has brought his little things here with arrow, you know, and so what makes Rib Mountain a little bit unique in it, and also the 2 starters of this thing, John and Herb team, Mo and Larry, but anyway, without them, we wouldn't be here. So I mean, it did do something nice, and they're actually thinking about doing it once a month thereafter. But I'm not quite sure if they're up to it. But we've got a unique type thing at Rib Mountain Bowmen for Wednesday morning. So.